We are ready to begin worship. And Daniel, if you'd be kind enough, Donald, if you'd be kind enough to pull up the service, let us begin. Our introit, Jean-Baptiste.
Terrific.
Our call to worship is a very simple classic, if you would read the indented. I'll wait till Donald pulls it up. Most people live their lives to make a living. Live your life to make a difference. And for those of you who wish to read with me an adapted prayer from Alcuin of York from the 700s. Eternal light, shine into our hearts. Eternal goodness, deliver us from evil. Eternal love, be our support. Eternal wisdom, scatter our ignorance. Eternal mercy, have mercy on us, that with heart and mind and soul and strength, we may seek and find your presence. And in so doing, may we light the candle to remind ourselves of all the suffering and all those who have passed in this last week. We remember a friend of Rick's that he has worked with for many years. We remember a best man at a wedding. We remember another member of another congregation in town. We remember all of them. We remember suffering in Ukraine. We remember the policeman who, the innocent person was beaten by policemen in Memphis. Anywhere, everywhere there is suffering, we offer a light, that light may overcome the darkness, not just in word, but in deed. Judy Hummer is going to read us a classic reading. If you would, Judy.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, let me unmute you.
We're unmuted. I'm unmuted.
Oh,
I was hungry, and you formed a humanities club and discussed my hunger. I was imprisoned, and you crept off quietly to your chapel in the cellar and prayed for my release. I was sick, and you knelt and thanked God for your health. I was homeless, and you preached to me about the spiritual shelter of the love of God. I was lonely, and you left me alone to pray for me. Christian, you seem so holy, so close to God, but I am still very hungry and lonely and cold.
With apologies to that great Jamaican theologian, the Reverend Dr. Bob Marley, I worry about everything a lot of the time. And as I look around me, everything is not all right. It's a little bit closer to being all wrong than all right. I'm a storyteller. I'm an observer. And most of the stories that I've gathered over the years of my life have come from watching people. My very favorite place to watch people is in an airport waiting room, because you will see all sorts of life in an airport waiting room. My recent trip to Orlando International Airport proved it to be true. When you go into that airport, you come in through the main entrance from the parking garages and the public transportation and the drop off and all of that. And as you enter into this great room, just opposite from you is a 12-story hotel with open balconies so people can sit there and look at the activity going on down below. And if you go look off to the left, there are stores and restaurants, and in a long hallway down to one of the terminals, and then the gates and the TSA lines down there. But just off to your right are the TSA lines and the gate for Terminal A. And I sat there one day waiting for my grandsons to arrive. And as I sat there, I saw the usual cast of characters. You see him in every airport. The first was the businessman who already had his jacket off. He had his belt off and looped over his jacket. He had loafers on so he could get them on and off easily. And he's on the phone closing some business deal. And then I saw a set of lovers, and they were hugging and kissing and goodbying, and how much I'll miss you, and oh, I'm going to miss you. And I watched as this young man kissed his bride or his girlfriend goodbye, and she went through the TSA lines. He watched her there, watched her go down to the trams that take you out to the gates, blowing kisses to her and everything else. And when she was out of sight, he turned and he got on his cell phone. And as he walked by me, I heard him say these words: "She's finally gone for 5 glorious days, and you and I will have 5 days together." Yuck. Oh, the audacity of that young man. And then there was the family. There's a family at every one, and this family had not one, but 2 strollers. And they had bags for milk, and they had bags for diapers and bags for the bags. And in one of the strollers, I could not see, but I assumed there was a baby. And the other stroller was empty because there was a young, just a little above toddler age, that was standing outside that, and his mom was desperately trying to hold on to his hand, and he was pulling away from her, and he was bumping into people in that busy great room there and knocking over luggage and just being a general nuisance. And all I could think was, dear God, please don't let that child be in the seat behind me on my 4.5-hour flight to Portland, Oregon. As out of desperation, I guess, finally the mother gave him a cookie. And when she gave him the cookie, he took it in his grubby little hands. And when he got that cookie, I suddenly heard above me, and I looked up in the artificial tree, which was above where I was seated, and there was a little bird, a sparrow, a wren. I'm not a bird person. I'm not sure what it was. At least I know it was not an eagle, okay? And this little bird, his beady little eyes darting back and forth and everything else, and all of a sudden he fixed in on this little boy. And when that little boy took a bite of that cookie, crumbs began to fall to the floor. And my little bird took off like a shot, headed right toward those crumbs. And just before he got there, all of a sudden from someplace else came one bird, and he picked up a crumb, and another bird and picked up another crumb, and my little bird got nothing. 3 little birds in this airport, inside the airport, grabbing crumbs, and my little bird flew back to the artificial tree above my head, and I swear I could see disappointment on his little beak. And as I sat there and I watched this, every time crumbs would drop, my little buddy would take off and try and get there, and the other 2 would beat to it. I couldn't stand it anymore, so I went in the store off to my left and I bought a bag of salt and vinegar potato chips. Okay, you buy the chips you like, I buy the chips I like. When I got back to my seat, I opened up that bag and I picked up the biggest whole piece of potato chip I could and held it above my head. And my little guy dropped down and took that potato chip and disappeared out of sight from the other 2. And when he was finished with that, he came back and I gave him another. 3 little birds, like Bob Marley sings about, living on scraps in an airport. As I thought about this scene, I began to think about the people that we all see in our lives. I know you see them. I see them. If ever you're out, you see the guy standing on the street corner with a sign that says, "We'll work for food." And as we drive by, we make a judgment. We make a decision. And we wonder if he really wants food or if he's wanting money to buy beer or alcohol or drugs or something else. Or we see the mother that was standing one day in the medium out on International Speedway Boulevard here in Daytona Beach, and she had a sign and she said, "Need money for milk for my baby." And people driving by, and some of us saying, "I wonder if she really has a baby." We see these people, they may be asleep on the ground in the park, or we see them beside a convenience store leaning up against the wall with no place to go. But then there are also the many thousands of people that we don't see, that are living in homeless camps somewhere. There was a convenience store near the barn where I kept my horse, and it was an older store, and so they were going to tear it down and build a new one. And when they did that, there was a woods in back, and they decided they were going to have to take out part of that woods so that they had more room for the convenience store. And when they did, they discovered a large, almost huge homeless camp in the middle of Port Orange, Florida. And nobody knew it was there. And their home disappeared for the progress of building a bigger store. And I thought, my little birds were yearning to be free. And when I was there that day, the one thing I wanted to do as I was leaving, I wanted to go, "Come on, guys, follow me. I'll show you the way to the door so you can be outside and live free, and you don't have to live on crumbs in the airport." And I think about the people that I've mentioned, and I think, how do we show them the way outside to be free? Free. Freedom is a word you hear often now, isn't it? You hear it out of the lips of a lot of people. And when I hear some of our political leaders and other leaders talk about freedom, and they bash us over the head with, "I believe in freedom," they wear it like a badge. And then they pass laws to take away freedom. They ban books. They tell our teachers what they can teach in school. They tell us what we can do with our own bodies and the decisions that we make. Freedom? Really? Freedom? They're the last people in the world that ought to be talking about freedom. Freedom is a dangerous word, isn't it? Those little birds, I wanted them to be free. Those people in homeless camps, I want them to be free. Those people standing on street corners with a sign, I want them to be so free. What was it that Coach Herm Edwards that we used for a call to worship said about how we live our lives? And rather than living our lives to make a living, we ought to live our lives to make a difference. A difference. That's a very famous quote by a football coach. There's another famous quote. It's on a sign somewhere. I can't quite remember where, but it's a rather famous little saying. "Give us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be," say it with me, "free." Let's try it again. Give us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. Maybe it's best summed up by Nina Simone's words. Listen. Amen.
Before we end, I want to say that it is very rare that we have so incredibly different ways of coming to the pulpit. And Larry represents the storytelling side that I haven't heard in years. Haven't heard that approach in years. It's wonderful. Larry Deach. Larry,
Yes,
hear me. You have to
Yes.
promise you'll do us and you'll come again and speak with us again.
well, like Paul Harvey used to say, I'll tell you the rest of the story.
It was a delight, and I see how you put the two together, the Moan together. I next time we were together, working together, I've got it now. I haven't worked with you before, so I get how excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
We've got Michelle, who has a very doctoral work. We've got a Buddhist base, and Larry represents that middle of America story. It just flows. I can't thank you enough for being with us this morning, Larry. I cannot thank you enough.
Glad to do it.
We will be with having Larry with us again, much to his horror that I will be bugging him. So again, I want to thank everybody before the final blessing, John and Christine, Rick and Judy. We want to thank Doug from Munich, Cindy and Larry from Port Orange, Tom and Gail from Port Orange. And the story you told about Port Orange, I was shocked about. I lived in Port Orange for 10 years. That was a shock to me. Wow. Karen Paul from Coral Gables, Serge from that warm, delightful area of Sedona, where it's like -10. Right, it's 34, but it's like -10. Danny Sorkin in New York, Angie Hill in Miami, Pat Sullivan in New York, Maureen Sullivan here, Pat is here, Cecilia is here, Helen Linda in Port Orange, Chris Diaz in North Miami. Thank you so much, and let us remember that final blessing, an odd combination of Irish and Hindu. May the road rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, and may the rains fall softly upon your fields. But when we meet again, may the divine in me greet and embrace the divine in you. Go in peace. Amen. Have a safe week, and thank you all. Bless you all. Amen.
Very good. Very good.
Great sermon. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Amen.
Wonderful.
See you all later.